Next, Leo Bonanni is going to come up and give us a talk. Leo graduated from right in there, from Hiroshi's group a couple of years ago, and built a visualization and analytical tool for understanding where stuff comes from and where it goes when it becomes the things that you use. And what you can learn from that is what you'll hear about next. Thanks, Leo.
Thanks, Andy. And I just want to say how happy it makes me to be on this stage in this building for this Rite of Spring, which is the Media Lab member meeting with so many friends and so many colleagues, all safe and sound. I was a PhD student in Hiroshi Ishii's group for many years here at the Media Lab, developing a technology called SourceMap, which is really dedicated to answering a very simple question, where things come from, which turns out has a really complicated answer. Let's do the interactive part. I've highlighted some of the elements in the periodic table in white. Can anybody tell me what product all of these elements are used in? Shout it out. It is in a blender, actually. It turns out to make one computer chip, we have found a way to wrangle those elements into a tiny, tiny little die. Isn't that impressive that we were able to take so many things from so many places all over the world to turn them into one of the most ubiquitous objects there is that you most likely have in your hand right now. So it's quite an achievement. And when I was building technology here at the Media Lab, I thought, you know, this is incredible. We've found ways to stick these computer chips in just about every part of daily life. I wonder what a computer chip is. I wonder who makes it, I wonder where it's made, and I wonder what it does to the world to make them. And so I started with simple mapping of trying to wrap my head, visual thinking, around what it takes to make a computer chip. It turns out this is the easiest way you could make one computer chip. It's the least number of countries and materials involved. It's the first of what would be called the source map. And you can see, right, materials zigzagging the Earth, dozens of countries, dozens of materials. Who knew? And with every one of those points in that map, there's a story. But what I like to think of it as is the world's biggest social network. Right? That object in your hand has been through so many other people's hands on its way to you that most likely your iPhone has had a much more interesting life than you. And it probably will once you throw it away as well. Now, it's almost impressive that these kinds of networks can exist and can work. Right? People you've never met halfway around the world contributing to the object that's in your pocket. And in fact, it's become increasingly the case that these don't always work. And no matter how big or profitable an industry is, it can come to a grinding halt when something hits one of those nodes in that supply chain. And well, I'll tell you why, but the real reason isn't that we don't know how to make things, it's that we've forgotten who makes them for us. We don't have that connection. And that causes all sorts of problems. Problems getting goods delivered, problems sourcing raw materials, problems manufacturing, social problems, reputation problems, environmental problems. And as these supply chains get more complex, these problems just keep increasing. So this was the technology, I'll tell you why. We didn't know what it was for yet, but that we invented at the Media Lab about 5 years ago. It was called SourceMap. The idea was all this information should be widely available. Anybody should have access to it. And so for the first time, it was a public website. It's free, sourcemap.com. You can go there, and you can see thousands of supply chains, which is what these turnout are called, for all the basic products you buy, use, throw away every day. And even 5 years ago, it was possible to zoom into those maps and see the exact factories. That's actually the Foxconn plant that makes the iPad. You could even see the mines. You could see the farms. You could see where people are that make these products. And this was a demo in the classic Media Lab sense. It was an answer to a problem nobody knew they had, and it was a provocation that modern technology makes it so easy to know these things. Why don't we know more about where things come from? And one of the most useful things you could do back then was, well, if you're a consumer and you need to choose between two products, how do you know which one is the right one for you? There was talk of carbon labeling of products, and so I thought, why not just make a calculator? Anybody could use it. They could compare one product from one place, another product from another place. Of course, something is only good for you if you're in the place you are. Something else might be better for someone else. And in this case, it was sort of counterintuitive things. Like you could ship an organic banana from India, it would have the same carbon footprint as shipping a conventional one from Mexico to Boston. And then by putting this website out in the world, we started inviting people to use these calculators, use these visualizations, and something pretty amazing happened. We realized that 10 years ago, it would have been impossible to know who farms the cotton in India that ends up in the shirt that you're wearing right now. But with social media, it's completely normal to be in real-time contact with hundreds of millions of people halfway around the world who live in completely different conditions than you. And that's what the real discovery here was, that you didn't have to know where things come from. You didn't even have to find out. You could just let people contribute, crowdsource the data behind where things come from. And in a sense, you could let the world run the supply chains that feed you from the bottom up. And that's what we tried to demonstrate. Now, there's probably 4 or 5 good ideas in that demo. Problem is, I had no idea what they were. So in typical Media Lab sense, we took this idea, showed it to the sponsors. And the sponsors, well, first companies just logged into the website, and the first question was, why would anybody log into a website and publish their own supply chain? We've been working for so long on software that keeps supply chains secret. Well, you can guess. So there are companies that are so proud of what they've done in terms of either social, environmental justice that they want to show it, that they're going to use it as a marketing tool, and companies like Tom's Shoes do that all the time. They just log in and they publish tons of data, which is great if you know what your supply chain looks like. The real opportunity here came when companies saw that and said, hey, I'd like to know what my supply chain looks like. Can you help me find out? Aha. Now we have a product. Because, and this was actually, I'll credit Bill Mitchell for this. He was one of my thesis readers, and he's probably the person most responsible for the building you're standing in. He said, this is great for activists, it's great for NGOs, it's great for companies that are green. But you know who else it'll be great for? People inside companies that want to push an agenda of looking at the externalities, looking at the risks. These internal activists are who you should be selling this tool to. And that's exactly what I did when I started SourceMap.com, because it turns out there's a bunch of momentum towards finding out more about where things come from, having supply chain transparency. And it's legal, it's voluntary, and as you saw, it's kind of becoming the norm if you want to keep business running. So this is a little bit complicated, but I'll just show you 2 examples of what we do right now as a company. One is the inside circle. The very first thing we do is show a company that with visualization and collaboration around the supply chain, you can already learn a tremendous amount about your risk. And the last example is the outside ring, which is if you open up your internal databases to get contributions from the field, from people producing things, you'll actually be able to ensure the stability and predict the ongoing growth of your industry as a whole. The first example is very simple. It's a project we're working on with the Center for Transportation and Logistics down the street, and it basically says, you've already got a bunch of data in your company, you're just not sharing it. And if you're sharing it, you're probably not visualizing it so that the decision makers don't know what to do when the next Fukushima hits. They don't know who to call. They don't know how much inventory is at risk. Very simple here. This is just a platform where a bunch of people inside a major manufacturing company contributed all the bits of data that they have. Somebody knows where the addresses of the vendors are. Somebody knows their phone numbers. Somebody knows how much inventory is on the floor. And with just visualizing that data, doing some simple math, we can already tell you what to do when the next Hurricane Sandy comes. How much of your product is at risk? How much inventory do you actually have? And by the way, it's totally counterintuitive, because sometimes a very small piece of your supply chain that you don't care about might be the only way you can get that product finished. And if you only have a few days on hand, that means you're going to lose weeks or months of product, just like happened with GM after Fukushima. So that's a very simple thing you can do just now by sharing and visualizing internally within a company. If we go to the outside, if you're willing to crowd map, to open up, this is for tackling really big problems and really long-term problems. And I'll tell you what the one big long-term problem is that I care the most about. It is the projected deficit in cocoa production worldwide for the next 10 years. See those red bars? That's how much less cocoa there is in the world than there is demand, okay? This is tragic. How can this be happening? How can such a big, $100 billion candy industry be facing that kind of cocoa deficit? It's tragic. It's many reasons, but the one that's always the most shocking, and I use it because it's a map, is very simple: climate change. It's getting warmer. Cocoa is grown around the equator. 80% of the cocoa in the world is grown in that green band. And watch carefully, because I can only do this once. That's how much cocoa growing regions there's going to be in West Africa in 20 years. So that's one problem. But there's many other problems. And one of those problems is a little bit dark, which is that in order for us to keep eating candy, we need to make sure that the people on the ground are getting enough food to continue to farm cocoa. And so this is where we've gone. We've said there's 2 million farmers. There's no way you're going to use SAP to find out what kind of inventory they're sitting on in the farm at the co-op. But if you can crowdsource it, if you can give them cell phones, if you can get field agents to go out and collect data and contribute it to a crowdsourced supply chain management tool, you'll be able to ensure that they make enough money, that they get enough food and education, that they're using enough fertilizer. So very simple. These are the kinds of dashboards now that you can start making decisions off of. But you can only make those decisions once you've opened up to accepting contributions from the field. This is where SourceMap is going next. It's really about predicting your supply chain, not just responding to risks, not just planning and optimizing, but actually predicting and ensuring long-term sustainable growth. It's really about bits that change the world. Thank you.
Have we got a question for Leo? If not,
Quick question, yeah. How do you validate the information as being as trusting information of the people who are reporting it? Because one who can create one has a ripple effect on the whole supply chain, if you will. So how do you validate and trust that?
This actually speaks to the civic media roots, like Ethan Zuckerman's in the room, of this project, which is actually I would like to call crowd auditing. So whereas before you would hire one auditor to go visit one factory and you would get one report, and the chances of that report being accurate are unknowable, now you have thousands of people looking at thousands of bits of data and in many cases having the ability to go and verify for themselves. And for us, that's a lot more eyes on the problem and actually more accurate data as a result.
Have you seen false data by chance?
No. We haven't had any misuse.
The question was, have you seen false data?
Yeah, and
we are recording this, so.
Yeah, absolutely. No, have we seen false data? Have we seen sort of abuse? And by and large, no, because there's nothing more scary than putting out false information about your supply chain. Yeah.
Thank you, Leo. It's often said that Entrepreneurship 101, the first thing you're supposed to do when you do a startup is create an exit plan. And when you do a startup with that in mind, that prevents you sometimes from tackling the big problems. I like to think maybe that's true, but only sometimes, because one of the characteristics I hope you'll see of most of the ones that have come here is that they're driven by passions to change the world, not passions to exit. And certainly both of those can survive, and the second will change the world.